Hi folks, let's talk about the energy of the time and the energy that prevails during this week. We have just 5 days ago come off of a full moon in Gemini, and based on everybody that I talked to last week and the interactions that I've had and the readings that I've done, there's a feeling when we have full moons before their corresponding new moons. Right now, the full moons are happening 2 weeks before their corresponding new moon. A new moon occurs in a sign where the sun is currently transiting, because every 28 days, the moon meets up with the sun. And so wherever the sun is, a new moon will occur. And sometimes 2 weeks after, or sometimes 2 weeks before, right now 2 weeks before, there is a full moon in the sign opposite the sign where the sun is transiting. So on December the 19th, 10 days from now, we're going to have a new moon in Sagittarius. And the sign opposite Sagittarius is Gemini. And sometimes we might have that Gemini full moon 2 weeks after the new moon in Sagittarius. Sometimes, as in right now, we're having the full moons 2 weeks before the new moon, in this case in Sagittarius. Related to, we're having the full moon in Gemini 2 weeks before the new moon in Sagittarius, which is the new moon that this full moon is related to. Now, energetically, on a monthly basis, where a new month is created every time the moon conjuncts the sun. So let me say that again. When a new moon occurs, it creates a 4-week month, a 28-day month. The word month is derived from the moon. And the energy of that month, I liken to, and you've heard me say this very often, the new moon occurs and the wave starts to move to the shore. A full moon occurs 2 weeks later, and it's like the wave crashes to the shore, the energy peaks, and then after the full moon for 2 weeks, the wave is receding. Energetically, a new moon creates a month, and that energy cycle remains the same, irrespective of whether the full moon that occurs 2 weeks after the new moon is actually related to that new moon or is related to that next new moon. So the energetic cycle remains constant. A new moon occurs, the wind comes behind our sails. Over the next 14 days, energy expands. At the time of a full moon, the energy becomes more intense, and then the energy starts to pull back. Now, our own energy is not just governed by the full moon, it is very often governed by what is going on with Mars, where we are putting our energy into pursuing our goals, setting boundaries. So the full moon is occurring 2 weeks before the corresponding new moon. When that happens, very often matters come up around the time of the full moon that allow us to close something, end something, turn a page on something, close a door on something that is connected to a past energy or cycle, so that by the time we get to the new moon 2 weeks later, we can open up towards and pour ourselves into the energy of moving on into something new. We can find ourselves closing the door softly. We can find ourselves worked up to the point where the door closes more strongly. This being a full moon that occurred about 6 days after Mercury went direct, with a relatively slow Mercury, but a direct Mercury. What I'm hearing and what I gathered is that a lot of things felt a little bit covert and unexpected and curveball-y. And as I've mentioned to you before, when Mercury goes direct, there is a kind of a curveball sense of still feeling like things we were expecting and what is actually happening. There's a kind of a dissonance sometimes. Everything that I've heard and gathered over the last week or around the time of the full moon has given me the impression, and you can let me know how it has felt to you in the comments, is that it has been energetically intense. And what I feel compelled to share with you in this video, at least, for whom it applies, because a full moon can have various meanings, not 45 various meanings, 4 or 5 or 6 meanings: visibility, contracts, conclusions in a positive way, conclusions in a challenging way, expressing oneself emotionally, setting boundaries, intuitive and emotional flare-ups. But also, when the sun is going over the let's expand this for a second. The sun is going over Sagittarius. So the sun in your chart is going over the house that is occupied by the sign of Sagittarius. Mars is there, Venus is there, Mercury is getting ready to come in there in 2 days' time. But the sun is in the house occupied by Sagittarius. And as it moves towards the new moon, all this personal planetary energy, Mars, Venus, the sun, soon Mercury, whatever they're bringing up, contribute to this new moon occurring on December the 19th, creating a 4-week period where action can be taken and seeds can be planted to bring the house occupied by Sagittarius into alignment with whatever it is that you value. Now, that doesn't mean that you are not taking action prior to that new moon in Sagittarius, especially because Mars is present in the sign of Sagittarius and has been for a second now. And when Mercury comes in, and Mercury came into Sagittarius before he went retrograde. In fact, the first half of November, Mercury spent in Sagittarius. What happens with the full moon in the opposite sign when it occurs 2 weeks before the new moon is that it is likely or possible that something is coming up that is connected to where the sun is, of course, because a full moon has the sun opposite the moon, where you realize that some experience or some sort of energy needs to be brought to a close in order for you to be able to embrace creating the new or the next. And when these endings are occurring, we don't like, understandably, it's not like we're rushing to create endings. Because sometimes even when there are challenges or conflict or problems, we're often wondering how it is that something can work out, or can I keep this element of this moving? Or how many of us have been in some form of relationship where we may not entirely be seeing a situation for what it is, or we may be underselling ourselves in some way, but even though there are problems or challenges, we kind of keep moving it around. When it comes to a full moon 2 weeks before a new moon, very often things can happen in such a way that the universe is saying, find a way energetically to end an experience and to bring it to its conclusion. Try and see if you can close the door gently, and yet at the same time find the balance between that and speaking and saying what you think is necessary. Sometimes speaking and saying what is necessary, we may feel that it needs to remain politic. Sometimes we may feel like, well, I'm going to say a few things just so I feel like I've said my piece and I can move forward. This is going to be very individual and very personal. Certainly with full moons, as I say, with Mars, assertive and not aggressive is preferred. And between being politic and more expressive, I really don't have a strong opinion about that one way or the other than I think that it's preferable to close the door softly and to shower a situation with blessings, as opposed to close the door more firmly, or better still, to find that kind of divine timing with regard to when it is that you can actually say your piece. What could that look like? You have decided that you're going to exit or move towards exiting a job. Getting to a point of making that decision and then using that decision to fuel you to start looking for the next job does not mean that until you find the next job and you've handed in your resignation and you're finally on the way out, that is when you might find that I can convey this or I can convey that, I can say this or say that. It doesn't have to happen before then. And even when it happens, you can do it so that the relationship is still maintained to the best of your ability. Sometimes, whatever it is that we're exiting may feel really problematic and unethical. And we may feel like, well, without expressing myself, I'm really enabling something that I'm not comfortable enabling. Even in these cases and these situations, depending on the nature of what is going on, sometimes when the situation is even trickier, it can be wiser and more Saturnian and more mature to recognize who it is that you're dealing with and simply decide that I'm just not going to make any more enemies here. I'm going to gracefully find a way to exit or minimize my involvement in this. Because if I actually express myself through the spirit of honesty or integrity, I don't know that it will land the way that it needs to with these particular folks. And if anything, it might just increase the animus in my life. In other words, I can still fight something and choose not to enable it. But the only way to do that is not to get in someone's face, especially if I'm feeling instinctively like what I have to say is simply not going to register. And if anything, it could make things worse, either for other people or for yourself. So these are where you kind of have to make decisions. But when a full moon occurs 2 weeks before a new moon, and we just had this happen 5 days ago, and I think we're still in the process of coming out on the other side of this full moon, the more important thing is to pay attention to what is coming up that is encouraging closing the door on something and preparing to open the door on something that feels more aligned. What you're closing the door on and what you're opening the door on is likely to be most directly related to where the sun is transiting in the house occupied by Sagittarius. The matter that might escalate or become full moony, or you might have some visibility towards, or you have an intuitive flare-up about, might be connected to how the opposite house, the house occupied by Gemini, is raising some sort of issues that are contributing to you wanting to turn the page somehow. Now, what I just said is only going to be worth digesting if you know your birth chart and you know the house occupied by Sagittarius and the house occupied by Gemini. So I'm not going to expand on it unnecessarily because I don't want this to get mired. But one of the things that I think we're in a place where we might have been reflecting on for the past 2 or 3 days, and we might be in the place of actioning and reflecting on now, is if last week had an intensity to it, now that Mercury is moving forward more directly and with greater speed, now that we are moving towards, in 10 days' time, a new moon that is going to have a direct Mercury encoded in it. And with that new moon, we might find that matters related to the house of Scorpio and Sagittarius are going to move forward more freely, because the last new moon that occurred on November the 19th had a Mercury retrograde embedded in it. Utterly embedded in it, because it was conjunct the new moon. The new moon and Mercury retrograde were conjunct each other. Mercury was combust. As I've said to you, when Mercury goes direct, for 2 or 3 days after it, or maybe even a week after it, we go through this kind of adjustment period around details still slotting into place around things that have been swirling about and being discussed for the past 3, 4, 5 weeks. And those reality checks, while on the one hand we might appreciate that Mercury retrograde gave us a crossroads and gave us a sense of what it is that we shouldn't invest in, and may have given us an alternate path, or may have just said, you stay where you are, be careful of investing in this thing that you're galloping towards. Let me just get you some facts here. While we appreciate that, the very fact of taking that alternate path or staying where we are, there's often an adjustment after Mercury goes direct where more facts come in that can be a little bit disorienting and jarring. Because it's always disorienting and jarring to be given a plan and then to be given another plan that says, well, no, we're going to be doing it this way. Oh, hey, I was going to do this job, but now I'm realizing things about that particular job that are problematic. I think I'm going to maybe take this job, explore this, and it sounds like I'm going to be doing this, and this is going to be the duration, this is going to be the pay, and then Mercury goes direct, and you find out, not quite, you're actually going to be doing this, and this is going to be the pay, and this is going to be the duration. You're just like, why did I not, but what is actually happening is that in people's minds, things that they may have thought would be the way to move forward while Mercury was retrograde, as Mercury has gone direct, they've realized that there are things that need to be recalibrated. So in fact, it is helpful to go through that period of disorientation the week after Mercury is direct, so that the planning can actually be a little bit more coherent than what it might have been while Mercury was retrograde. Now, if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, you may have found yourself much clearer about what you're doing and how you're moving forward, while Mercury is retrograde. Irrespective, Mercury went direct, we went into this full moon. That may have brought normal full moon kinds of things, and I don't feel the need to expand or run into any of that for the simple reason that I've already done a video on the full moon in Gemini that you can refer to. I'll place a link to that video at the end of this video. But one of the things that I want to introduce, so that this week, as you are moving forward this week, and as we move towards the new moon in Sagittarius on December the 19th, and while we still have a certain amount of energy, a balanced energy, because the energy I find is most balanced and most productive after a full moon, for the week after a full moon, about 10 days after a full moon. So for another 4 or 5 days, you can be reflecting on and actively figuring out what it means to close the door on a particular situation, to welcome in a new set of energies and take action towards planting seeds and building a new reality in the Sagittarius part of the chart. Certainly starting December the 19th. You don't have to wait till, I'm going to say this again, you don't have to wait till December the 19th to take action. What happens after new moon sometimes is that the universe drops you things, gives you things to work on based on some of the seeds that you've been planting before. But the energy after a new moon and for the month created by the new moon is very much of taking steps and planting seeds to bring the house where the new moon has occurred into alignment with what you value and your vision for that new moon is. And the energy of, in this case, Mars pursuing goals and setting boundaries, Venus introducing financial and relationship opportunities and artistic opportunities, or the opportunity to build bridges, the Sun making you evaluate, bringing his full light to the Sagittarius part of the chart. Mercury, starting in a couple of days' time, increasing communication related to the Sagittarius part of your chart. All these energies and actions feed into the actions that you take in the month that the new moon creates, including the other thing that feeds into that, the execution of the right agenda after a new moon occurs, is the full moon. In this case, 2 weeks before that new moon. And very often the energy of that full moon is to say, find a way to close the door on this, so that the Etch-a-Sketch can be cleared and you're moving forward in the right direction starting that new moon. So part of the reason why I have spent, 19 minutes talking about this, is so that you can see if what I'm offering resonates as a lens to use in order to process whatever has been going on for you as you headed to that full moon on December the 4th and the days after. Does it resonate? And you can still choose to move forward on a situation and close the door softly so that whatever it is that can be maintained from it can be maintained. All the aspects that occurred last week, the week of the full moon, were covered in the full moon video. The full moon squared the nodes. I talked about Mars trining Chiron. I talked about Mercury trining Jupiter and trining Saturn. This week, yesterday, we had Mars squaring Saturn. But we have tomorrow Neptune going direct, Mercury opposing Uranus. On the 11th, Venus squaring the nodes, Mercury trining Neptune, and then entering Sagittarius. And on the 14th, Mars squaring Neptune, the Sun trining Chiron, and Mars entering Capricorn. At least I've gotten the transits out. The bottom line is as follows. Mercury, for another couple of days, is still in the sign of Scorpio, and the personal planets transit through the sign of Scorpio. And the new moon that occurred in the sign of Scorpio on November the 19th, remember that till December the 19th, you are still in the month of Scorpio. And a significant portion of the Mercury retrograde that occurred between November the 9th and 29th occurred in the sign of Scorpio. Indeed, the conjunction between a retrograde Mercury and the Sun that initiated and created a Mercury cycle in Scorpio from November the 20th of this year to March the 7th of next year. This is all my way of saying a lot of the energies in the Sagittarius part of the chart now, because we've got Mars there, the Sun there, Venus there, Mercury soon to enter, and a full moon related to the new moon on December 19th, 5 days ago. But with a Mercury now direct in Scorpio, last week making the trines to Jupiter and Saturn, which had already made twice before, tomorrow opposing Uranus in Taurus, day after on the 11th, trining Neptune in Pisces. Mercury is still in his shadow degrees all the way through December the 16th. So we are treading old ground, but through a lens of resolution. And this is the odd thing about this Mercury retrograde, and indeed the personal planets going over the house occupied by Scorpio in October and November primarily, with Mercury being the current straggler, is that these transits trined, as I've talked about numerous times in the past few weeks, the North Node in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, and Jupiter in Cancer. As disorienting and painful as these topics that are being brought up might be, because there's a strong indication of connection to the chaos, potential loss in the house occupied by Pisces in your chart. There's a strong connection to how Saturn has been trying to get you to process lessons and stabilize the Pisces part of the chart so there are fewer energy leaks. And with trines, the energy has been supportive and harmonious in creating a portal. But because there's such a heavy emphasis between September the 1st, and especially now that Saturn is direct and Neptune is getting ready to go direct, and Saturn and Neptune are steadily going to be moving closer and closer and closer, that until the middle of February, when Saturn is the last of these two planets to leave Pisces, the intensity of stabilizing and settling past energy leaks is only going to become stronger and stronger and stronger. And so while dealing with past pending issues always has a rub, and we're talking about things that may have reached some sort of a crisis point in 2014, 15, especially 16 and 17, the astrology suggests that even with Mercury making these particular trines on the 6th and the 7th, with Mercury trining Jupiter and Saturn, and on the 11th with Mercury trining Neptune, and all the way to the 16th, that we are in resolution mode. And resolutions don't always have to mean I get 100% of what I want. Remember that you can design solutions and outcomes effectively only up to a point, and you can probably not design things as effectively as spirit. And also remember that the things that we sometimes think are good or bad may not be so. That layoff might be the best thing that actually happens to you. Hopefully. Layoffs are not easy, and we still have to do what we need to in order to take care of ourselves. That thing that I can look as a glass half empty might actually be a glass half full. Because the energy, and especially any energy of communication that is currently occurring from the Scorpio part of the chart, for whatever reason, has a constructive and a harmonious, an ability to resolve things or past things. And sometimes resolution can mean leaving a toxic situation. And leaving toxic situations is not easy if we have been mired. Change is never easy, even if on some level the change is clearing the clouds in our sky. Because very often we become addicted to, dependent on, comfortable with what we know. So with Mercury trining Jupiter and Saturn last week on the 6th and 7th, and getting ready to trine Neptune on the 11th, and making his way through the shadow degrees till the 16th, and with the new moon in Scorpio still exercising its influence all the way to December the 19th, and the Mercury cycle in Scorpio remaining active all the way till March the 7th, and with the Mercury retrogrades in 2026 all being in water signs that have been trining each other, with Jupiter recently, with Jupiter in Cancer and Neptune and Saturn and the North Node in Pisces and the personal planets going through Scorpio, we can expect whatever these themes are to continue to linger, and the astrology continuing to seek resolutions and to work with us to build something more concrete as we continue to head into 2026. We're not done with the Scorpio part of the chart. Where we are at right now, I would encourage anybody with a direct Mercury to pay attention to the more overt messages that may even feel like conclusions of things that have been working through October, November, into the middle of December. Pay attention to what they are, and be a bit more open to however bittersweet certain outcomes might be. The astrology is suggesting that at least from the Scorpio part of the chart, the Pisces part of the chart, the Cancer part of the chart, the houses occupied by the water signs in your chart, that whatever this outcome is might actually work out for you. It may have a rub to it because it is, the suggestion is that there are lingering issues that are at play here. And that change and departures and endings, even if they feel like, well, this does stabilize, this does minimize this energy leak, it does liberate me to move forward in a certain way, or, whatever it is. Sometimes I talk to clients who are desperately waiting for a particular employment situation to end. But when it ends, even in the most favorable way, they get laid off with a healthy severance package. what they've been looking for. Even when people get what they want, there is a mourning, a rub, anxiety. Even sometimes a kind of outrage that what they're leaving is going to just carry on without them. And I find that so fascinating to observe, because change emotionally, people are leaving an environment that they have been in and people that they have been seeing day in, day out, typically for more than a year, often 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years. So while they get a break from an environment that they're trying to get a break from, it's natural to miss the environment too, and to kind of be a little bit shocked at how replaceable we all are. But the replaceability is what is allowing us to have the freedom to move forward in the direction that we want. And yet there's this rub. The astrology suggests that, at least from the Scorpio part of the chart, and Mercury is still in Scorpio for 2 days, and the new moon in Scorpio is still exercising its influence till December the 19th, and there's a Mercury cycle where we're going to, while we're dealing with everything that's coming out of all the other transits, all the way to March, we might be surprised by the time we get to March that something concrete is actually built for us by Mercury, with this Mercury cycle in the Scorpio part of the chart. If you were to say, Avi, what does all this mean and how do I would just say Mercury is now direct and going through his shadow degrees. And those things that were a little bit hanging in the balance, October, November, if the communication about things is more overt now and feels a little bit more conclusive, pay attention to it. And don't be so quick to rush to a negative outcome or judgment. Because especially if the communication is coming from, as the chart and the transit suggests, from the Scorpio part of the chart, there could be room for, as bizarre as it sounds, some form of mending. When we deal with toxic people and toxic energies and people playing their cards close to their chest and people not quite being quite so open or transparent, or not showing up the way we want, sometimes confronting those situations can make them even more covert. Whereas the observing of what is going on, and the more Saturnian, wisely, strategically choosing a slightly more non-confrontational attitude can actually allow you to exercise influence in a situation, or for things to work out in a more balanced or beneficial way than scaring or intimidating the other person through directness. We all have to figure out what sort of communication approach will work for us based on what we're dealing with. But now I've talked about 2 different types of resolutions and endings that has been present for the past week and continues into this week. One of these endings is directly related to the house occupied by Sagittarius in your chart, where the full moon in Gemini could have encouraged you to bring closure to a past situation that is characterized primarily by the Gemini part of the chart, but the closure of that allows you to move forward to newer pastures in the Sagittarius part of the chart, both now and especially after December 19th. The other closure we are experiencing is that of this Mercury retrograde period from November 9th to 29th. Mercury, having started to go through his shadow degrees from October the 21st, and now moving between 21 degrees of Scorpio and about 6 to 7 degrees of Sagittarius. And Mercury enters Sag in 2 days' time and is going to clear these shadow degrees by December the 16th. And that is another kind of resolution. What was coming up with this Mercury retrograde now becomes more overtly transparent. Also, with Mercury being direct, in order for you to become more you and follow the path that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart, what is it that is coming out of this Mercury retrograde direct that is actually freeing you and allowing you to move forward in the Taurus part of the chart? Mercury is going to oppose Uranus in 2 days and has already opposed Uranus twice. What is this communication that's coming from the Scorpio part of the chart that is somehow trying to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart and is trying to encourage Jupiter, inform Jupiter's just gone retrograde, as Jupiter tries to end a 12-13-year cycle and start a 12-13-year cycle in the Cancer part of the chart? What has this Mercury retrograde brought, and what resolutions and communications are coming up that actually, with these communications taking place, allows you to follow a path that is more authentically you in the Taurus part of your chart? Now, out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 transits occurring this week, I have covered and talked about Neptune going direct, Mercury opposing Uranus, Mercury trining Neptune, Mercury entering Sagittarius. 4 of them, because they're coming from the Scorpio part of the chart. From the Sagittarius part of the chart, the energy is more empowered, but at the same time, it is edgier and more urgent. From the Sagittarius part of the chart, the nodes are being squared. Saturn is being squared. Neptune is being squared. And yesterday, Mars squared Saturn. On the 11th, Venus squares the nodes, which is what happened with the full moon on December the 4th, which squared the nodes. On the 14th, Mars squares Neptune before he moves into Capricorn. On the positive side, the reason why I said the energy is more empowered is the planets moving through Sagittarius also trine Chiron in Aries. Chiron is trying to heal you in the Aries part of the chart, to reintegrate some part of you that was separated from yourself through some kind of trauma, some kind of a conditioning in your childhood or early teenage years. And when planets trine Chiron, they support this healing and this reintegration and this empowerment. And so the idea is that through this empowerment lens that connects the Sagittarius and the Aries part of the chart, action must be taken in the Sagittarius part of the chart. Again, action must be taken. There's an urgency to action being taken in the Sagittarius part of the chart that can actually help you lean more towards the North Node in Pisces and actually help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart, which is what Saturn is trying to do, has been trying to do. So there's both this ending and resolution energy at work, but also things have started to feel edgier. Like, I need to be in action more. Things have to happen. Things have to be done. With Mars pursuing goals and setting boundaries. Mars squaring Saturn yesterday. Mars squaring Neptune on the 14th. Venus squaring the nodes. Action needing to be taken in the Sagittarius part of the chart that allows you to move in the right direction. You need to figure out, on the heels of the full moon in Gemini on December the 4th, you need to figure out what you need to do to invest in yourself in the Sagittarius part of the chart. And how is that investment going to change the landscape of everything going on in the Pisces part of the chart. The very act of investing in yourself more in the Sagittarius part of the chart is reflective of the trine with Chiron in the Aries part of the chart. But that investment in yourself provides and gives the North Node in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, it opens the right gates for them to help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. Number one, for you to move in the direction which is its own energy with the North Node eclipses in the Pisces part of the chart, and to release what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart. Invest in yourself in the Sagittarius part of the chart, because it will help you, availing with Venus squaring the nodes now, availing through artistic opportunities, financial opportunities, relationship building. You might find that investing in that now, all the way through December the 11th, but even while, because Venus is going to move forward in square Saturn and Neptune. During Sagittarius season, invest in yourself in the Sagittarius part of the chart, because that investment will help you figure out when you can continue this process of releasing what you need to release to in the Virgo part of the chart. Remember that the week before and after January the 3rd, is going to bring more clues and greater urgency to continue to release what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart, and thereby to build and lean into what you need to build in the Pisces part of the chart. That energy may be distinct from Saturn stabilizing the crisis in Pisces, in the Pisces part of your chart that's been growing since 2012 and may have reached some sort of peak or crisis in 2014, 15, especially 16, 17, that Saturn has been trying to stabilize, minimize energy leaks. And that energy is very powerful to the middle of February of 2026. And it might be a distinct set of energies, but this investing in yourself in the Sagittarius part of the chart holds a key and an urgency. So if opportunities show up, opportunities to pursue goals, set boundaries, avail of Venusian opportunities, Venus can drop gifts, doors to knock on. Mercury is going to come in 2 days in the Sagittarius part of the chart and move things into a more overtly communication level. And then the new moon in Sag on the 19th. That investment with Mars squaring Saturn, Mars getting ready to square Neptune, pursuing goals and setting boundaries in the Sagittarius part of the chart, Venus squaring the nodes. Venus squaring the nodes, what Venus is bringing the Sagittarius part of the chart to help you release what you need in the Virgo part of the chart and lean into the Pisces part of the chart, that's one energy. Mars pursuing goals and setting boundaries in the Sagittarius part of the chart to help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart and the crisis in Pisces, and to minimize energy leaks. That's another energy. But that is all operating right now. Mars' squares are a little bit more intense and may require, Mars is the first of the personal planets to square Saturn and Neptune, to square the nodes and then square Saturn and Neptune. The Sun has already squared the nodes. The Sun is going to be moving towards squaring Saturn and Neptune next week on December the 16th onwards. On December the 16th, the Sun squares Saturn. Then Venus will square Saturn. Then Mercury will move towards squaring the nodes and squaring Saturn and Neptune. And Mercury these planets will also trine Chiron. Greater empowerment and investment into what you want to build in the Sagittarius part of the chart and to avail of opportunities. With Mars in Sagittarius till the end of this week in the 14th, focusing still very much on also setting boundaries in the Sagittarius part of the chart and pursuing action there, is somehow going to really help both, I'm saying this for the umpteenth time, releasing what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart and leaning into what you need to lean into the Pisces part of the chart, but also stabilizing and minimizing energy leaks in the Pisces part of the chart. And that Mars energy being the first energy this week may be making you feel very unsettled. What steps do I need to take? Who is potentially transgressing my boundaries? Mars' squares can make us a little bit, what boundary is being crossed? Just know that we're going to have more squares. The sun will square Saturn by the 16th, on the 16th. So your awareness will increase of what it is that needs to be done. Then Venus, then Mercury. So just know that it's a process. You're juggling the trines from Scorpio and the Scorpio new moon, the Scorpio part of the chart, and edgier energies, more empowered energies within the Sagittarius part of the chart. On the heels of Mercury going direct and a full moon 5 days ago, encouraging you to kind of close the chapter on something in the Sagittarius part of the chart to start to create something new. Two planets do change signs. Mercury does come into Sag on the 11th. And Mars becomes the first of the personal planets to enter Capricorn on December the 14th. After the 14th, for about 45 days, Mars will be putting his energy in the Capricorn part of the chart, encouraging you to set boundaries in the Capricorn part of the chart. And when Mars is in Capricorn, Venus will meet up with him and they will conjunct. Oh my God. How shall I summarize everything? First and foremost, what needs to be ended as a result of that Gemini full moon so that you can move towards newer energies in the Sagittarius part of the chart? What messages are you getting that are more overt, that seem to be bringing Mercury retrograde into resolution? And what actions need to be taken within the Sagittarius part of the chart, both to help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart, but also to allow you to release what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart and lean into the Pisces part of the chart where the nodes are happening. I'm going to leave it at this. Members. The last video I did for Cancer Rising members, will you please let me know if you can leave comments on that video or not? Someone very kindly pointed out to me that they were not able to leave comments on that video, the Cancer Rising video for members. But when I look at it from my side, the comments are enabled. So please let me know if you can see comments or not. It's something I've got to watch as I upload more membership videos and rising sign specific videos, where I am currently in the process of talking about the eclipses and the trine energy from Scorpio and square energy for Sagittarius as it actually applies to rising signs. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. When you subscribe to it, there's a bell icon next to it. Click on the wiggly bell on top and you'll be notified when I do new videos. You can contribute to this channel for free by liking this video, commenting on it. You can contribute this channel monetarily by clicking the thanks button underneath the video or donating to the channel. With the information on memberships and donations is in the description box below. Thank you very much. I don't take names of members or subscribers or who is emailing me about issues just out of respect for privacy, but you know who you are. In the last 5 or 6 days, someone made a lovely donation to the channel. So please be thanked sincerely. I can't, when something comes through from PayPal, email that back because, anyway, thank you. There's typically other stuff I say, but I am a little spent. I hope you find this useful, and most of all, I hope you find that it helps you kind of navigate where we are right now. As always, there'll be more to follow. So thanks for your patience. Take care.